So, as I'm sure you know, Nigeria's Safe Schools initiative has come under intense fire, and the Nigerian Senate has finally taken action, summoning key officials to account for the glaring failures of the initiative. Launched with great fanfare in 2014 and relaunched in 2022, the program was meant to safeguard Nigerian school children from attacks and abductions. Instead, it's become a stark reminder of broken promises and unfulfilled pledges. As the Ministers of Finance, Education and Defense face questioning, Nigerians demand answers. Where did it all go wrong? Why have 1,680 school children been kidnapped and 180 educational facilities attacked since the initiative's inception? Whatever happened to the billions of naira that were budgeted for the project? The Senate probe is clearly a long overdue reckoning. But will it shine a light on the systemic failures that have left Nigerians, most vulnerable citizens, at risk? Well, Dr. David Okoror is the Chief Security Strategist at the International Institute for Security and Governance Studies in Abuja, who was heavily involved as a consultant in the relaunch of the initiative in 2022. In fact, he led the design of the plan and supported its implementation. He also helped to train the police and civil defense forces on the concept of safe schools. And he joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Let me just be clear that so people don't think I'm mispronouncing an Igbo name. It's not Okoror, it's Okoror.
It's Okoror. This is
right, and that comes from
Isha in Edo State.
In Edo State, right? Okay, just to be clear on that. First of all, just thank you for coming in. Give us some background. How did the original Safe Schools initiative come about in 2014?
Well, you recall that after the Chibok girls' abduction, there was a global uproar about the incident, and a fallout of that was that Gordon Brown led...
Gordon Brown is the former British Prime Minister.
Yes, led a group of international individuals and organizations to raise funds to support some aspect of rehabilitation and relocation. So essentially, part of the funding was used to ensure that there was continuity of education by the girls that were affected. So through that program, these girls were taken and relocated to various other schools. That was the primary objective. But I know that aside that, part of the fund that was made available, because there were various sources of funding that was provided at that time, different people provided funding. After the girls were relocated, there were other things that were done. And I think that currently those are subject of the hearing by the Senate.
Right, but part of it obviously was security for the schools and protection of the schools. That was paramount. And what happened to that initiative subsequently after 2014?
Well, after 2014, it more or less fizzled out, because you know that by 2018 there was the Dapchi abduction, where 110 children were taken.
I went to Dapchi. I did a report from Dapchi, so I know what you're talking about.
Okay, in 2020, the Kankara children were taken. You had the Jangebe, you had the Afaka children that were taken. You have, within the space of December of 2020 and July of 2021, 5 schools were affected. Children were taken, and a total of 838 students were taken from those schools. So it became a big issue. And I think because government was bothered, then the head of the Ministry of Finance, the minister then, Dr. Zainab Ahmed, the minister then decided to convene a high-level meeting in Abuja. Virtually everybody that mattered in Nigeria were there: business, foreign partners, donor agencies, military, security agencies, everybody that mattered were there. And the idea was to say, how do we finance safe schools in Nigeria?
Right. Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but just to be clear, the 2014 initiative that came on the back of the abduction of the Chibok girls that got international attention, and it became clear that schools needed to be not only protected, but those who had been displaced needed to be moved around and all the rest of it. That was supposed to be an ongoing thing. And then it floundered and fell into the rotting vegetation, basically, as a lot of things in this country do. And so in 2022, that's when you're talking about, isn't it?
No, I'm talking now the foundation, the
Right.
concept of the current program. Now, we need to distinguish between the two. The first program you spoke about, the one that came on board after the abduction of the Chibok girls, it was called the Safe School Initiative. But the one that was launched in 2022, this is a copy of that plan, is called the National Plan on Financing Safe Schools.
Right, but I mean, without confusing our audience,
Yes.
essentially this was supposed to be a continuation
More or
of the
less,
other program,
because it was to solve
it's
the same
essentially
problem.
about keeping schools safe.
Solving the
Right,
same
so
problem.
in 2022, with you involved as a consultant, the Buhari administration came up with that national plan on financing safe schools,
yeah.
which was essentially a plan on how to protect schools and the way to finance that plan in the 19 states that were most at risk.
That's right.
So basically, it had floundered the first time, and so here you are giving it another chance in 2022 with people like you coming in, a lot of experts and so on. What happened? How did it come together, and what happened subsequently?
Well, this document was launched in 2022, like you said, December 16 precisely, and the implementation was supposed to commence in 2023. For the purpose of the implementation, this program was to run from 2023 to 2026. That's the period, the duration. Now, for this period, for the duration of the 4 years, the total investment of federal, state, and local government was put at 144 billion naira. So for 2023 budget, 16 billion was approved for the program.
Okay, I'm going to come to the budget in a minute, but just to understand the concept before we get to the budget, it was supposed to prioritize community safety, because the theory was that if a community is safe, from what you were telling me earlier, it means the school within the community will also be safe.
Okay, so I need to explain that.
Yeah.
So in designing this, the philosophy was, some of the things we looked at was that Nigeria have over 160,000 schools. And the resources, if you're going to put boot on the ground, you don't have it. And we also realized that the most effective way of protecting institutions like this was to ensure that the community within which the school is located is safe. If the community is safe, therefore, the school will be safe. And additionally, we looked at the African adage.
And obviously the community is made up of people as well,
yes,
who would like to be safe.
Who want to be safe, exactly. And then we talked about the philosophy, the African philosophy that says it takes a community to bring up a child. And we said, why don't we adopt the whole society approach? Whole society approach means that the child who is in the school, the child is aware of his own personal security. So we developed the child's personal security. The next was that the school itself is also aware and properly equipped to provide security for children in that environment. Then, of course, the community where the school is situated, we are to build the security resilience of each of those communities. So
like a concentric
ring.
Exactly.
And then on top of this ring is the law enforcement agencies. There are police, civil defense, DSS, and all that. So they form the outer ring, and then, of course, the bigger society, government agencies, and international community. So it was a whole society approach, from policymakers to law enforcement. So this was the basic philosophy. Now, so the focus was to ensure there is safety in every community where schools were based.
And so in designing that, because it sounds very holistic, listening to you, very comprehensive, very holistic, did you ignore the original Safe Schools initiative from 2014 and start completely from scratch in 2022, or was there supposed to be some form of continuity?
Well, yes. For instance, in the area of ensuring that there's continuity in education, that means children whose education was disrupted because of crisis in their place. So this plan incorporated that, for instance, to ensure that children who lost the opportunity to go to school under this plan were able to continue. And then, of course, yes, this was the major component of that. But like I said, it was the same problem we're trying to solve. They stopped at a point, and then this program took over from there.
Right. What about the military or police deployment aspect of it?
Well, look,
because I would imagine that's a crucial aspect.
Critical. So this plan, the design of this plan involved the military, defense headquarters, very senior generals from defense headquarters, then the senior directors from the Department of State Services, then you had senior police commissioners, officers from civil defense, and then the Ministry of Education. So everybody was involved in the plan of this program. While the plan was going on, after the plan was produced, we had to do, through consultations with various segments, we had a national stakeholder forum in which everybody was invited. Security, even hunters were part of it, traditional rulers, everybody was brought together in a room, and they reviewed the document, including state commissioners of finance and economic development, commissioners of education. They all took a look at this, and then they made input, and then we went back, and then this final document was produced. So in developing this policy, every segment of society was taking it.
Yeah, but that was in theory. In practice, how was it supposed to work? Because a critical element is security.
Yes.
Is the deployment of security personnel. And I understand that there was supposed to be both the general kind of deployment around the areas and then a rapid reaction force that was supposed to go in at short notice if something went awry.
Okay, now you're talking about implementation. So part of the implementation was to first ensure that the security agencies are appropriately trained for this purpose. So for instance, for the police, we had a strategic forum for every senior police officer, starting from Deputy Commissioner of Police to the IG himself. So we had a forum in which they were briefed. They became aware of what safe school was all about. After that, we had further now had to train the lower level people, and we trained 109 DPOs from each of the senatorial districts. In addition to...
As divisional police officers.
Divisional police officers,
right.
Yes. And then in addition to 37 police in charge of operation in all the police commands nationwide. So they were trained on what to do. And then the police, Nigeria Police Force, bought some vehicles. If you see, they set up a particular group called the Safe School Protection Squad. They still have it. And then
I've seen some of those vehicles.
Okay, so they were trained, and some vehicles were bought, bikes were bought, and some other things. I think Civil Defense also did something similar. Now, after that was done, we further, because this was a community thing. So it's not that the police were to work with the community as a second level, second tier of response. So the police trained men that had the capacity to respond when there were crises. Civil Defense did the same. The DSS was supposed to do their own stuff. Ministry of Education, that were also an implementing agency, carried out different type of training for different stakeholders. So there were different meetings and different programs, activity that was done, all to ensure that the implementation of this program was holistic.
So in the final analysis, in your assessment as a professional and as a consultant on the project, it was absolutely, at least in theory, foolproof.
Now, the design of the program was good. Here, this was the solution to Nigeria security, school security issue. But the funding was the issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm coming to now, because the Buhari government at that time provided 16 billion naira to support the plan. What happened to that money, and where were the other places monies were supposed to come from?
Well, okay, so the first...
presumably you got paid as a consultant out of that 16 billion.
No, I wasn't paid, but that's a story for another
You weren't paid?
I wasn't paid.
Right.
So,
Okay.
but that's
You have my commiseration.
That's 35 because this was a national assignment, and
Right.
there were issues that we had to ensure that this document, whether we were paid or not, was developed.
So what was the 16 billion used for?
No, the 16 billion was deployed. Various agencies, implementing agencies. The implementing agencies were Ministry of Education, the Department of State Service, the Nigerian Police Force, Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Force, and the DHQ, the headquarters, the defense headquarters. These were the implementing agencies, and this funding was spread out to these agencies.
And after that initial provision of 16 billion naira, nothing else was provided out of the 144 billion naira that was budgeted over that 3-year period. And there was absolutely no budgeted provision for 2024 and 2025. Is that right?
Even the 2023 budget, that was half of the budget. See, the budget investment this was what the federal government is supposed to, federal, state government and local government are supposed to expend over 4 years.
So the federal government put out its own...
For half of the budget for the first year.
Right, what it was supposed to put out.
Yes.
Right, and none of the others put out anything.
None of the other put out anything.
So the states didn't put out, the local governments
did. Didn't. So we just had that 16 billion and no other funding out of the 144 billion.
Up till now.
None was provided.
Right, so the state governments didn't pay, the local governments didn't pay, and I understand that international donors had made pledges. They were also supposed to provide funds, but they never did.
Well, maybe I won't blame them. Maybe in terms of the implementation, they were not brought in, because the idea was that during the high-level meeting, the agreement was after this plan was developed, the meeting was going to be reconvened, and the plan will be presented to them so that they can know the portion. But I knew that second meeting never had. So all that was available was just the 16 billion for Safe School to date.
So basically, Nigeria scuppered a very good plan.
Yes. If you want to put it that way, yes, we did it.
And as I said, you're a professional. You're a very well-respected person. You're a chief security strategist at the International Institute for Security and Governance Studies here in Abuja. If that plan had been implemented, would we be where we are today, or would there be zero attacks on schools today?
No. We won't be where we are, obviously. But
well, it's not obvious. We need your expertise to explain to us how implementing this plan could have stopped what happened today, what happened over the last few weeks from happening, and how that might have put us in a completely different light to the international community than it is today.
No, but if this plan was implemented, we're sure that significantly these issues of kidnapping will have been, particularly in the states we call most at-risk states. There were 19 states, and this plan was to focus on addressing the kidnapping in those areas. But look, we're supposed to have what we call a critical infrastructure backbone that support this. It's not in place. So initially what was done because of the funding was just a few items here and there and a few, whatever could have been done. But sustained funding was to make a difference. So really, this is a dead document without money. And that's what has happened to Nigeria.
So basically, I mean, to be clear, the government failed to implement its own plan that you guys had come up with. And basically, they keep telling us and to the Nigerian people and wanting us to support them and say we're doing everything we can to secure this country, and we're doing, but this plan that was specifically targeted at protecting schools and safeguarding school children, very vulnerable citizens of this country, simply was never implemented.
This is the case.
And given what has happened in the last few weeks in this country and the way that the international community now sees Nigeria, is there a sense that this government is trying to revive that plan? Have they got in touch with you and perhaps other people who were part of it?
Yes, I think I have an idea that the government is keen to do something.
What do you mean you have an idea? What does that mean?
No, I know that it's general movement. There are things that we are aware of, we have become aware of, that government is interested now to do something about this, because for 2 years, nothing was done absolutely. But now, because of all the issues, the government will want to revive this and maybe put some money behind it.
Right. And again, let me ask you this. Your sense as a consultant on this project is that the reason why we've had these spate of abductions is because it was never implemented.
Yes.
And if your assessment is that this Safe Schools plan is a good plan from a security perspective, and the only thing that got in the way of that very good plan is funding and what appeared to be a lack of political will to see it through.
I think yes, primary lack of political will, and then the second, of course, is the funding. Because if the government understood this, when this government came in, I think they didn't understand what the issues were. So, but if the political will was there, then largely most of the issues we are seeing will have been very difficult to have been what it is today.
And one thread that I'm seeing through all of this is a lack of continuity of government, because when it was first devised in 2014, it was never seen through. A new government came in and they didn't touch it until 2022 or thereabouts. And so that continuity was never there. And then subsequent to them coming up with this even more comprehensive plan, it was also thrown in the dustbin, essentially, because it was only funded with 16 billion naira at the outset and never touched again until now.
Never touched again.
Right. So what message do you have for, as a consultant who worked on this project, what message do you have for the Nigerian people and for the Nigerian government in the context that we find ourselves today?
Well, it's to say we don't have an option. See, as I talk to you, kidnap of children can still take place in any part of Nigeria. It is the terrorists or the bandit or the kidnapper that determine where to strike, when to strike, how to strike. So they could decide tonight they are going to a location. So we do not have on the ground any responsive scheme. How do you respond? How do you prevent this from happening? When it's happening, how do you react? And after it has happened, how do you respond? There is no framework in place right now apart from this. No organized framework, because this was supposed to be an organized framework that enabled the government, the private sector, and even the community to work together. So number one thing is to say government should please take a second look at this and properly fund it, because it will require quite some money to protect schools, 160,000 schools. I have visited various parts of the country. The last time we were in Sokoto, as far as Niger Republic border, looking at schools. And what we saw were pathetic. No fencing, no structure on the ground to respond, to prevent and respond to crisis. So it's going to be a lot of resources. That is why it requires political will. The second is to say that issues of school abduction can be addressed. We have the capacity to address it if the right things are done. For instance, we need to develop what we call security resilience in communities around the country. That will not only address issues of school security, it will also address issues of community security. And if there is community security, you will have the kind of kidnappings of ordinary people. You won't have fear of traveling along Nigerian roads. You have all sorts of things. So we need to focus on building security resilience in communities. They will complement what the police and the military are doing. They will be the first line of defense and protection for us, all communities. So if we are willing to do the right things, the issues of insecurity we see, particularly as it relates to schools and the community, can easily be addressed.
Okay, I want to thank you very much indeed. It's been very good to have you here, and thank you for enlightening us with your knowledge. Dr. David Okoror is the Chief Security Strategist at the International Institute for Security and Governance Studies in Abuja, and he was heavily involved as a consultant in the relaunch of the Safe Schools initiative in 2022. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.